We are in conversations, as you know, with the parliamentarian about the best way to get budget reconciliation we're trying to accomplish across the finish line. But we think the law is very clear.
So Republicans, in essence, want to pretend like their trillion-dollar tax cuts are free, like magic. Or as Chip Roy, one of the most conservative Republicans around here, said, like fairy dust. A middle school math student could tell you this is ridiculous.
Remember the $4.5 trillion in tax cuts that Donald Trump was pursuing? Yeah, make that $6 trillion. And that's based on the Senate Republicans' release of a 70-page budget blueprint that would pave the way for an additional $1.5 trillion in new tax cuts on top of the $4.5 trillion. And that's a lot. That is certainly a lot. But they are doing some tricky pizzicky math to pretend as though their tax giveaways aren't really going to cost us all that much, that it's not going to add to the American debt. It will. Now, Senate Budget Chairman Lindsey Graham unveiled the sweeping new budget resolution that raises the debt ceiling, moves forward with Trump's tax cuts, includes Trump's border policies, meaning more funding for border security, and his defense and energy priorities. Now, the resolution they unveiled on Wednesday would increase the debt limit by $5 trillion. Additionally, the measure opens the door to a $150 billion increase to military spending and $175 billion more for immigration enforcement to help Trump carry out his mass deportation plan. And as for the spending cuts, still a work in progress. The Senate sets a much lower floor of $1 billion in reductions, each for committees handling healthcare, food stamps, and other programs. However, that can be raised if needed to compromise with the House's estimated $2 trillion in cuts. Yeah. So do you guys understand what's happening here? The Senate blueprint added even more in tax cuts. And they're like, whether you're talking about the House or the Senate, both chambers are looking to cut our social safety net in order to justify increasing tax cuts.
Yeah, so the number one goal of the uniparty, whether it's establishment Republicans or establishment Democrats, my entire life has been tax cuts for the rich and for corporations. So Donald Trump ran as a populist, said that he wasn't going to do any of that, but that didn't make any sense because he'd already promised a giant tax cut during his campaign. And then when he got in, of course, number one priority was a giant tax cut. So renewing his tax cuts from his first term cost $4 to $4.5 trillion, depending on which source you look at, right? So now the point that Anna made is that we're gonna add another $1.5 trillion, okay, on top of that. Because it's never enough for the rich, it's never enough for the donors. So guys, number one, first of all, understand this. Doge, all big cuts. Even if every cut was true and correct, it's only $130 billion, okay? So then you've got the gold cards. Donald Trump is like, oh, it'll create trillions of dollars. To my knowledge, no one's bought one. Maybe 3 people will buy one eventually.
The gold card is basically rich foreigners who want US citizenship, so they buy it for $5 million.
These nuclear tariffs, I wonder how much they say they're gonna raise. Well, let's show you the math real quick, and then we'll come back and tell you their magic trick. They have this hilarious magic trick. So 4 trillion at a minimum, but other places like the Higher Tax Foundation says it's 4.5. Then you add the 1.5, you get the 5.5 to 6 trillion. Now, where have I heard this number before? 6 trillion. Well, let's find out.
The other tariffs are going to raise about $600 billion a year, about $6 trillion over a 10-year period.
So far, it looks like we're going to have about $6 trillion of investments, and you wouldn't do that in years in this country over the last number of years. $6 trillion, and that's going to be much higher by the end of the year. And think of what $6 trillion is. You wouldn't have even a small percentage of that under this other system. We're going to be an entirely different country.
They need to account for $6 trillion in taxes for the rich. And here comes this tariff plan, which they magically this week start saying is going to save us $6 trillion. Gee, look, I challenged Kari Lake and others on Piers Morgan panel about this. Let's take a quick look at that. All of this is actually just a ruse to pass that $4.5 trillion tax cut because they want to be able to say what you guys just talked about. Oh no, the tariffs will magically bring us $6 trillion over a decade. So don't worry about that $4.5 trillion we're going to funnel to all of our donors, to Elon Musk, to Donald Trump, and to all the richest people in the country and to corporations. That's what all of this tariff nonsense is about. That's what the gold card nonsense is about. That's what Doge nonsense is all about. It's all to say, oh, don't worry about how we're going to blow up the debt and the deficit by doing another gigantic tax cut for the rich and for corporations.
What I loved about that is at the end of the show, Piers Morgan invited all of us to come back on 4 months from now and see how it turned out. Because Kari Lake and Batya were like, oh, no way. Okay, these tariffs are gonna last forever and they're gonna be amazing and they're gonna bring in all this money. And a lot of Republicans voters don't even realize that we're about to give away $5 to $6 trillion to the rich. Like they don't even know it. Like when I say they're like, that can't be true, right?
What, really?
Yeah, they don't, because all we are talking about is tariffs and Doge, et cetera. No one's talking about the giant tax cuts.
That's true.
And you know why they're not talking about them? Because number one, the Republicans, they want to pass it in the middle of the night.
They do, that is true. And there's all sorts of convenient distractions.
And they know that if they make a big deal out of it, it'll be deeply unpopular, or it's already polling very, very negatively. And they're not releasing the details of how much it's gonna go to corporations and what an enormous percentage go to the rich, right? They're trying to keep that all under wraps, pass it in the middle of the night, and then go, oh, well, look at that. I guess that's what the American people want. And the Democrats should be screaming from the rooftops about this giveaway for the rich. You saw Schumer mention it there, but really there should be a coordinated attack here, and I just don't see it at all, because this is super unpopular and not at all populist.
I'm sure the super wealthy Democrats in Congress who have become super wealthy as a result of their insider trading on information that we're not privy to, I'm sure they really do not want to cut taxes. I mean, they're very worried about this tax bill. I don't buy for a second that Democrats in Congress don't want to cut taxes.
So look, my whole life, we've cut taxes under Republicans, even though Democrats had plenty of people in Congress to block them. No matter what happens, the Democrats' excuse is always, there was nothing we could do. There was nothing we could do. And they're getting ready to sing that imminently right now. And by the way, that Piers Morgan appearance was just yesterday. Between yesterday and today, they added another $1.5 trillion in tax cuts. That's the story we're reporting now.
Okay, so take a look at the big picture, okay? Because understand what's happening right now. American consumers are about to deal with an insane amount of inflation as a result of Donald Trump's tax policies. And you're right, he is a real believer. He genuinely thinks you can even just get rid of the income tax and replace it with high tariffs on foreign imports. And that's how the federal government will raise revenue to function. Okay, but what that ends up doing is it moves all of the taxes, because tariffs are taxes, onto American consumers while giving the wealthiest among us a massive tax cut.
Oh, that's such a great point. Again, that's like a double whammy against populism, because even if tariffs did work, Anna's right, we all pay that when we have higher prices for cars, beer, Coke, et cetera, right? But meanwhile, they're like, oh, it's all even. It's not even, because the tax cuts are almost all going to the rich.
Yeah, it's redistributing wealth from the bottom to the top again.
Yeah,
it's just another method of doing it.
Least populist thing you can do. That's a great point, Anna.
Oh my gosh, okay,
so now the magic trick.
So let's talk a little bit about the Senate parliamentarian.
Yes.
Because
that person is the most important person in government.
Most important person in government,
that's what the Democrats
according to Democrats. Yeah, Democrats
whenever
are
they're in charge.
We really wanted to pass the Build Back Better agenda, but we just couldn't do it. The Senate parliamentarian really stands in the way. So in order to pass legislation in the Senate, you have that legislative filibuster, right? And that legislative filibuster requires a threshold of 60 out of 100 senators in order to pass legislation. However, there are certain instances where if the policy has an impact on the federal budget, you can actually pass it through reconciliation or through a simple majority of 51 senators as opposed to 60 senators. Now, the individual who weighs in on whether or not you can do that with any given piece of legislation is the Senate parliamentarian. And in this case,
face with the Senate's blueprint for their budget, they're like, yeah, we're not really that worried about the Senate parliamentarian, essentially.
Not essentially, they just said.
They just said it.
Yeah, they're like, look, the Senate parliamentarian said basically that they could the budget can go forward, but that's not a controversial thing to say at all. Yeah, the budget involves money, it makes perfect sense. That person did not rule on whether taking $4.5 trillion in tax cuts and making them permanent does not affect the budget, right? And the Republicans just pretended that they did.
Yeah.
Just made it up out of whole cloth. But that goes to the point that Anna and I have been saying for a long time on this show. So the Republicans are like, parliamentarian, who cares? We're just gonna ignore them, okay?
Yeah.
And now what does that do? That puts the Democrats in a position of trying to defend the parliamentarian, which is gonna play very poorly in politics, right? Oh no, but you cannot do that bill that you want because of the parliamentarian.
But they will. Look, Democrats love the parliamentarian. They love the legislative filibuster. It is the convenient excuse for why they can't get anything in their agenda passed. And I say agenda because, look, when Republicans want something, they bulldoze, they steamroll, they do whatever they need to do to get it done. Democrats will campaign on things that might be popular, economic policies that might be popular, knowing that there are certain obstacles baked into the system that they can point to as their excuse for why they couldn't get it done. And by the way, just to give you the specifics, as reported by the Associated Press, typically the current policy baseline proposal would need to pass the muster of the Senate's nonpartisan parliamentarian to make sure it abides by the strict rules of the budget process. Senators from both parties have been arguing in closed door sessions with the parliamentarian staff for and against the idea, but Republicans are pressing ahead for now, regardless of the outcome. They know that they're gonna get what they want. They're gonna pass this tax bill. That's what this is, essentially. It's a tax bill. They're gonna pass it.
And here's another instance, and we're really going out on a limb here because the Democrats claim the parliamentarian is maybe the most powerful person in all of government because they can literally stop bills and say, no, you need a 60-person vote on that, and they can never get a 60-person vote, right? So our theory, and we told it to you not now, but years ago, for all these years we've been telling you, the parliamentarian is irrelevant. You could just either fire them or ignore them. So now the Republicans are going to try to ignore the parliamentarian as we told you that they could. Will they be allowed to get away with it, or will the entire government stop and go, Republicans, you are wrong. The parliamentarian is the most important person and they will decide the fate of this bill. Let's find out. Let's find out together, okay? Because the Democrats will ask for that. And my guess is, you'll all see with your own eyes, nobody's gonna give a rat's ass about the parliamentarian. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.